are up everywhere. All right, welcome to the Unalienable Right. We're joined. It's the two warriors from across the country here. Myself, Shawn Farash. You've probably seen enough of me everywhere, but this legend on the other side of the screen, Dr. Cordie Williams, 1776 Forever Free, the Megaphone Marine. I'm going to give him the floor here. Let him introduce himself as we're finally on a show together at the same time. We're going to work out the bumps and bruises and the kinks. We're streaming in like 6 different locations. I know I'm live on Twitter, on Getter, on the YouTube, on Facebook. We're also on Rumble and on Dr. Cordie's Facebook. But Dr. Cordie, for everybody who's jumping on the stream right now, tell everybody a little bit about yourself and about what we look to do here on the Unalienable Right.
Well, legend coming from you. Oh my God.
Legend.
Wow. I'm humbled, sir. I would take a bow and take my headphones off for a second, but I don't want to screw up our sound. No, kind of like you, man, just in a communist state with a communist governor, great people, great patriots here. But, when the COVID scam started and they started doing the, because I don't know if we'll get censored for that or not. And then they told people to wear jock straps on their face. You and I just kind of sniffed something in the air, and I don't think it was potpourri. And we just knew that we had to ensure that was red, white, and blue. And I'm sure that people like Adolf Newsom and whoever that communist, what's her name? I know there's Witless in Michigan.
We have I call her Cuomo in a dress, but her name is Kathy Hochul. Unfortunately, her eyebrows are drawn on like Nancy Pelosi. They're in the wrong spot. But, I call her Cuomo in a dress, and we have Lee Zeldin who's running in to unseat her, which would be really nice. But that's her name, unfortunately. I don't like saying it much. It makes my skin crawl, and it's not because of that beautiful steak I just cooked. I'll tell you that much. That thing was tremendous, as many would say. But that's her name, unfortunately. Hopefully we can call her the former governor of New York, unelected, by the way.
That would be great. And it always depends on the rigging.
Right.
You never know. Or as Trumpy would say, the rigging.
Yeah, the rigging. It's not fair. What they're doing is not fair, unfortunately.
No. But, here we have the same situation. And honestly, I had a video that went viral, got 21 million views, talked down some riot gear police. And, we've been doing very different and similar activism up and down the state. Across the country, we haven't stopped because the other side.
No, we can't. We can't stop. Really and why don't you tell everybody too a little bit about 1776 Forever Free? Because I've got Loud Majority out here, and we've been around for a couple of years. But what is it that you guys have been up to in California? How did the nickname Megaphone Marine? Obviously, you served our country, and we thank you for your service. But how did that nickname come about, and how did that become a thing? I'm interested in the backstory too.
Yeah. So we were doing rallies when Scarf Lady used to come out of her little burrow called the podium, and she'd poke her little eyeball out of the podium like Quasimodo, and then you saw the beat up brown paper sack Nulf. When he would come up to the podium, my wife Tanya and I, she's a chiropractor as well. We saw that nonsense going on. Did a rally in San Diego, which is about 45 minutes from me. Then we did another one in Pacific Beach, and the third one we did was probably, I guess it was May 1st of 2020. And we got there early. 3,000 people showed up. It was like a force of maybe 25 cops. By the end of the day or the afternoon, there were 500, no joke, 500 CHP. Almost like Adolf Newsom had prepared for it. And, they had guys on horseback, full riot gear, slamming women to the ground, handcuffing them. Certainly not what officers that understood the Constitution. And I love my police officers, I love my firefighters. But that day really faced tyranny on the level that we've experienced the last 3 years. You could argue the election and other things, but where it's just so overt and physical. And so, they were listening to the wrong guy. They were listening to a communist dictator who was supposed to be a governor. And I just got and grabbed a megaphone and went up on a embankment and just started to speak life into these guys and talk to them about the oath they took in the Constitution. And, that went viral, and that proceeded to really create this 1776 Forever Free movement, where we did stuff in Maricopa County, dealing with election fraud. We've been to polling locations at different times. We've done tons of rallies. We were heavily involved in the Recall Gavin Newsom effort. I was one of the lead spokespersons. And then we started partnering with different groups while simultaneously teaching the Constitution. So kind of dipped our hands into everything. And you know how it goes running a nonprofit or community org. You got to sustain yourself and at the same time, really get people motivated to get involved.
Yeah, and I apologize to anybody who's having audio problems. Apparently, there's a little audio issue going on. We'll troubleshoot that as we continue on, but I'm trying to make fixes here. I'm not sure if it's my program or if there's a connection issue somewhere. You know what they do? They like to mess with it. But we're getting feedback from folks on Rumble and some of the other sources that the audio is not necessarily doing pretty good. But we're going to work to fix that. But I want to talk about the Nord Stream 2 issue. We were just talking about that before the show started, and kind of some stuff that you'd read. We talked about it on the morning show on LFA. We spoke about it briefly on Loud Majority show, and unfortunately, it looks like we might have played a role in this. And I'm not exactly I wouldn't be surprised if it was us. I wouldn't be shocked if we did something here, because Joe Biden came out bumbling and stumbling a couple of months ago in February, basically promising to do something if push came to shove. So what are you hearing about Nord Stream 2 and that whole situation going on over there in Europe, and what do you think happened?
Yeah, well, I often wonder if that brown stain on Biden's white pants about 6 months ago, whenever it was, if that's kind of what's happened to corrode his brain. We'll let the doctor primary culprits, but I think all signs point to Russia. I really do. I read a Gateway Pundit article,
Russia,
and it had kind of
they say it. Russia, that's what they say. Russia, Russia, Russia.
Everything was great with Russia.
Everything was great with Russia.
Oh, see, I'm not even going to try next to you.
Don't do it.
Dude, I have talked to people around the country, brother. And when you take a consensus on who does the best Trump impersonation, well, I have to say it is the man from Long Island. Everybody kind of knows that. Yeah. So at any rate, no, but I would say it's Russia for sure. There's just so many different motives and storylines, especially, they have an axe to grind with other European countries to obviously, resist their takeover of Ukraine. And, I think they're salty.
Yeah, I think so too.
About that.
And, honestly, I was listening to Dan Bongino today. I was looking at some of the stories today that were coming out about Nord Stream 2. And I was also keeping an eye on this hurricane, which I've been talking about for the last, 8-9 days. There have been people who have been looking at my Twitter account and saying, wait a second, you like weather? What is the deal? Why do you keep posting about weather? Do a Trump video. And I was going to do one. Doing a weather forecast for it. And then I said, it might just be in bad taste. This is going to be a bad storm. Let's just try and keep people safe. Maybe we'll do one afterwards or something, because this thing looked like it was going to be maybe something that was pretty much routine for the Gulf Coast. And it went from, potentially making landfall as a Category 2 to making landfall as a very destructive and powerful Category 4. And we're hearing reports out of Tampa, reports out of Cape Coral, reports out of Fort Myers that this thing is just it was worse than expected. It was the intensity was undermodeled to an extent. The track was pretty much nailed by the European model, but It's just, I mean, just the videos of the storm surge right now. Listening to Levin, listening to some of these other commentators talk about what's going on in Florida, it's just wild. And there's nobody better prepared to deal with something like this in a crisis than Ron DeSantis. I firmly believe that. So we will see exactly how that plays out. But back to Nord Stream 2 and what we've been doing in the country. We've been talking about how we have been sending money, another $1.1 billion in weapons to Ukraine. You're a border state. I would rather see, $1.1 billion go to border security, 87,000 IRS agents be hired, to better secure our border instead of come to your doorstep with guns and demand money. That's called armed robbery, as Lauren Boebert likes to call it. I'm sure, and you're, like I said, you're in California. You're a border state. I'm in New York. It's becoming a border state. 5 more buses just landed in New York City today, or yesterday, with immigrants that came from the border. They're now constructing a tent city in the Bronx, which would probably be the closest AOC has ever come to this border crisis, now that it's going to be popping up in her district or around her district. But Nord Stream 2, we talked about it. Ukraine is getting all of this money, and then we were buying Russian gas. So as the U.S. tends to do, we fund both sides of the war. I mean, this should come not as a surprise to anybody when you see us sending money over to Ukraine, which is probably the world's biggest laundromat. Remember, 10% for the big guy. And then deciding on day one of the Biden administration to turn off the Keystone Pipeline and stop the construction. So now we've got to buy our gas from Russia. But, Cordie, in your state, you have Hairdo out there who wants to be the leading state with the Green New Deal initiative and all of these new policies and everything. But wasn't it only a couple of weeks ago that California had to turn on 4 natural gas powered generators just to reduce the strain on the grid? Wasn't it just a short time ago when it was Governor Newsom who said, or was this idea, just go buy electric cars, and then all of a sudden the request came in, well, please don't charge them? Well, how the hell is anyone supposed to get anywhere if they can't charge their electric cars? So is this something that you're just getting used to, the flip-flopping, the logic out there in California, or is this a new thing that you're seeing, and has it gone further?
Well, I think it's just not to use this word again, but it's so appropriate. It's the antithesis of like the Democrats and what it's become and who they are. It's really the Communist Party. And the playbook, whether you read W. Cleon Skousen's book, The Naked Communist, and you just look at everything that's gone on, you look at the Italian prime minister or president now and what she said, and I guess her acceptance speech or a speech that she did on the road, before she got elected, there's so many different signals of not just us, but the world is fed up with this global agenda. And it's happening here in California for the greasy-haired Adolf Newsom, the guy that loves booger sugar, whatever nickname you want to use for him, they're all fitting. This slime ball that in 2008, I believe he was the San Francisco mayor. I don't know if you saw this clip, Shawn, but the guy's literally talking about how all you have to do for homelessness is give people a home and give them food, and that'll get rid of it. And then fast forward, the reel that's out there shows him saying that in 2008 and where we are right now, and how it's increased by, I think, some 34 to 43%. So this is totally a ploy in every sense of the word, like all these different agendas, whether it's the immigrants coming in, whether it's us sending, money overseas and playing both sides like China Joe's doing, all of it is to get control. And all of it is so basically this beautiful republic we live in this beautiful state of California and New York can become, kind of Venezuelan sandboxes. Of communism.
Yeah, and we heard Donald Trump say it. We were at the
agenda.
rally with the great J.R. Majewski, and we were sitting there, and Donald Trump talked about how he said, if Joe Biden was able to become president, this would be Venezuela on steroids. And I think, we're not there yet. And the best part about federalism, the best part about, having a constitutional republic and having that beautiful 10th Amendment, the enumerated powers and, any power that's not listed in the Constitution goes to the states. is what you're seeing happening in Florida. Because when the COVID measures were so draconian, when people were told you can't go to school, you can't go to work, you can't go to church, you can't go to the small mom and pop businesses, but you can still go to Costco, you can still go to Lowe's, you can still go to Home Depot, when those things were just sitting there in our faces and they didn't make sense, when everybody and their mother knew that the mask, right, the mask mandates that we saw didn't make sense. You had a governor like Ron DeSantis. You had a governor like Kristi Noem, who may have made some mistakes here or there. You had a governor like, and I don't like the way he handled the election, but the way he handled COVID, Brian Kemp, he did very well out in Georgia, scored a lot of points coming out of the pandemic, and I think he had to score those points because he botched the 2020 election so poorly and so badly. But you had governors shield their people from the overreach of the federal government, and that to me is their job. And that is our position here with the loud majority, basically saying we need to elect a governor like Lee Zeldin who will behave like a Ron DeSantis. Pennsylvania needs to elect a governor like Doug Mastriano who will behave like Ron DeSantis. Arizona needs to do the same thing with Kari Lake. Texas needs to put its faith in Greg Abbott, who, sometimes is kind of lazy and isn't on the forefront of these issues. And sometimes he's not so lazy and he's doing things like sending buses of illegal immigrants to Kamala Harris's house because she refuses to come visit the southern border. Do you believe that it's the same job as the job of the governor, essentially, to shield and protect his or her people from an overreaching federal government? I mean, you do teach Constitution classes. Why don't you tell everybody a little bit more about that?
Yeah, no, I mean, I think that testicular and ovarian fortitude is fleeting in the realm of leadership. And that's really what guys like DeSantis, Kari Lake in particular, and some of those guys, we know why they're well-intended, whether it's Abbott or where it's Brian Kemp. They're going to go where the political winds flow, so to speak, very rhino-ish in nature, in my opinion. But they have kind of come around, but only, I think, because you've got people like Kari Lake, people like Donald Trump, people like Ron DeSantis stepping up. So I think that people are not being cowards and having to really step up for the people. But no, it's all about state sovereignty. It always has been. The establishment and this global agenda and the bureaucracies that control this country have tried to move us away. That's certainly what we teach at 1776 Forever Free, because we feel that the battle is going to be fought and won. And I know you do this with your group out east by my beautiful family, because my wife's from New Hyde Park. Like, we teach the whole idea that if we can take back our state and we can take back our local counties, there's hope for us. Because when you start to look at the tremendous amount of FRAUD that's out there, was there in 2020. I mean, I just in my travels last, the states are all we have. If state sovereignty goes, God help us. So that's really where, I ran for U.S. Senate, but that's where we need to put our flag in the sand and really draw a line and say that on our states. And that's kind of the last hope I think we have of saving this.
I think you're right about that, and I think that when people ask kind of what's next, there are a lot of folks who might not understand. When they talk about civil war, you don't want that. Nobody wants that. I don't want that. I don't want to see blood in the streets. I don't want to see people, having to take up arms. But I do think we're going to start to see red states versus blue states in terms of policy. And, maybe it's going to start with abortion rights, which isn't a constitutional right in my view. Maybe it's going to be the Second Amendment. Maybe it's just going to be different, whether it's tax brackets or different rights that the state governments and state legislatures believe the people have versus rights that states like New York and California don't believe the people have, that are ultimately going to come down to it. You're going to see, I think, blue states are going to fail. I think you're going to see mass exodus from those blue states. I think you are going to see even some, people who are right now very much entrenched on the left come out and maybe, start to question, how the heck does Gavin Newsom keep winning elections? How is the Democrat Party so entrenched in New York? We want to talk about voter fraud. There's voter fraud in every election, and it may not be widespread, and it may not be enough to tip every election. But I had this confrontation with somebody about a year and a half ago in a local Republican club meeting, talking about how he's going to protect election integrity. And I raised my hand and I said to him, let me ask you a question. You just told me that you know that dead people have voted in past elections here on Long Island. And he said, yes. I said, well, I need you and everybody in the room here to agree that that is physically impossible. A dead person cannot vote in an election. What are you going to do to get to the bottom of finding out who voted for that dead person? Because when one dead person votes in any election, your vote, anyone who's watching, anybody who's listening later, anyone that's here right now, one dead person votes in an election, it just took that one vote, one person, and it diminished it. It took as much as it took the level that your vote counts, and it lowered it. And you should be upset about that. Even if it doesn't tip the scales of an election, your vote is supposed to count as one vote. But if somebody who is not supposed to be voting in your elections, if somebody who has passed away is voting in your elections, and your vote doesn't count for one vote, your vote counts for 99% of a vote or whatever it is, however many people, and he didn't have an answer, and the room kind of turned on him and it got nasty for a minute. It got nasty for a second where they started yelling at him. And that's not what I wanted, but I want him to understand that we take this very seriously. Now, the one thing I like to do is toe the line, because while I would rather see paper ballots, while I would rather see, elections being called and figured out and counted in one day, like they did in Italy, which we can't seem to do here. Right now, we're stuck with a system that can be manipulated. You have no excuse absentee in certain states. You've got these machines that we have, they've been demonstrated can be connected to the internet. And as you know, anything that's connected to the internet can be infiltrated. Have they been? I don't know. Yes or no. Can they be infiltrated? Yes, because they're connected to the internet. We have to do something about that. We have to make sure that these are safe. And if they're not safe, then we need to move away from them. And there's a lot of people who don't want to move away from them, but they are what we have right now. So whether we think the scales are tipped in our favor or not, my biggest message is to tell everybody that, yes, although we know there are games being played with our elections, we have to overcome those games. In the state of New York last year, we had ballot referendums that were put on the backs of our ballots in the local elections, but they were statewide ballot questions. One of them was for same-day voter registration, which would have been a disaster. And another one was for no excuse absentee balloting, which means a mail-in ballot for every registered voter in the state. And that would have been a complete and utter disaster, and those failed. So they were not able to get passed into law. They were not able to become the norm in the state. We won that. And if the state wanted to rig the election last year, to rig future elections, that would have been the way to do it. And we were terrified that that was going to happen, and it didn't. And thankfully it didn't, or maybe they tried, and we just came out and voted it down in such great numbers. The point of the matter that I'm trying to make is that it's possible. And so for anybody in Pennsylvania, anybody in New York or California who's thinking, I'm not going to go to the polls because it didn't go well in 2020, or that I know that there's some funny business that goes on in the election, you got to drag 10 of your friends out and vote, because we can overwhelm the system. What do you think about that?
I think they showed us that with Youngkin getting into office. And if I've been getting too close to the mic, I'll back off.
No, that's good.
But I think they showed us that in Virginia, just with the way they overwhelmed the vote. And I've been saying for a while, and I know you have too, if you overwhelm the vote at the ballot box, you can overwhelm the cheating.
That's
and
right.
That's honestly the strategy that we have to have. Some people are like, oh, well, the Republicans, they're saying to mail your mail-in ballots and get them in early. You guys, like, voting in person, it's always going to be the way. Can they still cheat? Yeah, there's a million ways they can cheat. But why do you think that they created this flu virus and caused everything to be shut down to create mail-in voting, which was at one point 80-90%? I mean, the last 2 or 3 elections in this state have been mail-in ballots. There were mail-in ballots primarily in my election.
Right.
Right. I only got 500,000 votes, third place.
Right.
So it never makes any sense. All we can do is try to navigate the rules of the system.
Yeah, I
until
agree
we
with
can
that.
change
And,
the rules.
we have the midterms coming up, I think, in about 40 or so days. And another poll just came out. I'm on hotair.com, and I'm looking at it right now. Morning Consult. This is a Politico poll. Dan Bongino, he likes to call it bullshtico, and because they tend to lean very, very far to the left. And the Politico playbook, if you get that every morning, it tells you everything that they're going to be talking about for the day. I encourage everybody to sign up for it so that you know what Morning Joe is going to talk about on MSNBC before he knows. It's the DNC talking points that go out every morning into your email if you want to know what they're going to talk about and how to rebut. I bet you Ron DeSantis does that because he seems to always be 2 steps ahead of them. And I bet you he's just reading what they're saying. And what he did, just a short diversion before we get to this poll, what he did is I thought it was just brilliant because and when he did this, I said, keep Martha's Vineyard in the news cycle. We've been saying it on a Loud Majority show on our We Will Not Comply podcast and our LFA TV spot. And I know you're going to be on Jeremy Herrell's show tomorrow, which is incredible. I can't wait to watch that. Is send more flights. We keep saying send more flights. Why? Because if the mainstream media continues to freak out over Ron DeSantis, over human trafficking, I've never seen anyone be human trafficked before after signing a consent form, by the way. But if they continue to freak out over this, they can't talk about abortion. They can't talk about Orange Man Bad. I haven't heard a word about the FBI. I haven't heard a word about anything from Mar-a-Lago. That seemed to have gone quiet because they're too busy freaking out over Martha's Vineyard, and they're too busy freaking out now over a hurricane that hit the Gulf Coast of Florida in the peak of hurricane season, and they're surprised that the water's warm, because of climate change, which we know is a big hoax anyway. But what DeSantis did was brilliant because it took what the left loves to talk about, and it kept them from talking about it. And now we're starting to see Google search trends flip, where the border crisis is eclipsing Roe versus Wade. It's eclipsing the FBI stuff. It's eclipsing the Orange Man Bad searches on Google. And now everybody's saying, wait a minute, why are liberals on Martha's Vineyard deporting illegal immigrants? Is there really something going on the border? Eyes are starting to open. You know a lot of what's going on the border. And we now know a lot more of what's going on the border, whether you're in California, a border state, or you're in Ohio, which isn't a border state but is becoming a border state because of drugs and illegal immigration. So I think anybody who's listening needs to get on that Politico playbook and look at it. But this poll, conducted from September 23rd to 25th, surveyed 2,005 registered voters. Important to make the distinction between that and likely voters. The margin of error is 2 points. The poll found Biden's approval rating dropping to 41%, which to me sounds high, with 56% disapproving. That's down from 46% in last week's poll, which had Biden's 2022 high watermark. 45% of voters said they would vote for a Democrat for Congress if the election was today, compared to 43% who preferred a Republican candidate, the poll found. In last week's poll, Democrats had a 5-point lead, 47 to 42. Republicans now basically within the margin of error in a highly left-leaning poll. I'm very interested to see when Morning Consult and Politico is going to decide to look for likely voters, because the enthusiasm gap, which is something that we all have to talk about, Republicans are more enthusiastic to vote, which means if you poll likely voters, you're probably going to see a much different result than if you poll registered voters. And this is another form of election rigging. Suppression polls. People were freaking out 3-4 weeks ago when the ballots started to tighten up. A lot of those polls were registered voting polls, and it's important to know that distinction, that it's likely voters, because of the way primary turnout trends into general elections, that it's likely voters that matter. And as these polls, if you look on Real Clear Politics, you can see the trend clear as day. Any poll that says it's polling LVs, likely voters, tends to be a Republican lead in the generic ballot. Any poll that's polling RVs, registered voters, meaning people who may not be likely to go out and actually vote, tend to lean Democrat. And I think another reason for that, too, is this whole idea that now if you say you're voting Republican, you're considered an extremist. Cordie, you heard about what happened in North Dakota, right, with Kayla Ellingson and him getting ran over by a drunk driver?
Yeah, but
right.
We're the extremists, right? We're the racist.
we're the deplorables, all that. Yeah, it's disgusting. And it would be on the news cycle for probably 2 weeks if it had happened to a Democrat.
Yeah. I mean, did you see what the killer of Kayla Ellingson said and why he ran the kid over? He thought he belonged to, quote unquote, a Republican extremist group. I wonder where he got that idea.
Yeah, I don't know. Maybe a guy that doesn't have dementia but can't remember his name, and then calls out congresswomen that are that died a month ago in a car crash. At a where was he at? He was at like some event across the pond, right?
Yeah.
When he calls out the lady that passed.
Yes.
That was mainstream news everywhere like a month ago.
Yep. He called out Congresswoman Walorski. He forgot that Congresswoman Walorski died in August and asked if she was at a White House event.
And then they try to play it off, and nobody's saying. My dad had Parkinson's. I had guardianship of my dad for like 12 years. And the beginning stages of Parkinson's were dementia, over 65, yet long-term early onset dementia at some point, right? At some point within 5 years of turning 70, if you're not doing all these things, proper diet, there's all these different things. So to say that, I mean, at least, I don't even know, like 50 times, maybe more, maybe hundreds of times. Like there's too many to count. And now the White House is going to try to spin this. It's fascinating.
And we hear about it. I'm on the Post Millennial here, where he basically was thanking. He was thanking several bipartisan elected officials. Biden named Jackie, referring to Jackie Walorski, and then asked, "Jackie, are you here? Where's Jackie?" I mean, this is getting crazy now. And then this is not someone who maybe died last week and he forgot. This was a big story in a car crash in Elkhart County, Indiana, in August. 3 other people perished. Walorski and 2 passengers were driving southbound on State Route 19 when a vehicle veering left into oncoming traffic crashed into their car. The sole occupant of the second vehicle was identified as 56-year-old Edith Schmucker of Napanee, Indiana. And I do remember seeing some left-wing people, because Walorski happened to make some pro-Trump comments, excited that she died in a car crash, which is disgusting. I was not happy when Ruth Bader Ginsburg passed away. I don't wish death on anybody, especially my political opponents, because I'm not a fascist. I'm not an extremist. I'm not a Nazi. And now you see what happened to Kayla Ellingson, and there are a lot of people, where if we were to go out, and we may do this very soon at one of the next events that we have, go into a crowd and see who knows who George Floyd is versus who Kayla Ellingson is. And I think you're going to be alarmed, because the media will not talk about it. They will not talk about the fact that this man on camera right here in this picture made a speech and called half the country extremist. They will not talk about the fact that the president of the United States radicalized an individual to run down an 18-year-old because of a political dispute. They will not talk about the fact that the killer himself actually came out and said, that he believed he belonged to a Republican extremist group. He was drunk. The driver was drunk. Okay. And they will not come out and make any sort of mention over the fact that he was running down and trying to murder this child because of political motivations, because the killer was somebody who was radicalized, it looks like, by Sleepy Joe, and the victim, the person who was killed, 18 years old, lost his life, belongs to the Republican Party in some capacity. And to me, that is wrong. If you really want to heal this country, as Joe Biden said, he's out on bail, as somebody is pointing out in the chat now. When you still have January 6th protesters, none of whom killed anybody, are locked up without a trial, some of these people. I mean, this is really wrong. How do we fix this clear and present error and danger to our justice system?
We need new leadership. We need to overhaul, and somebody that isn't crapping their pants, but is making other people crap their pants. And that's 45. And that's really what we need, because you're seeing all the different levels of hypocrisy go on, whether it's the guys that are still locked up, all the IRS agents, the raid on Mar-a-Lago. You're seeing all these intrusions and invasions on freedom. And they're not stopping. They're actually getting more aggressive. I'm curious as to what's going to happen as we get closer to November. But then also as we get closer to 2024, because I think try to criminalize or arrest Trump and then, then he'll have, a record, so to speak, criminally, and he won't be able to run. But who knows? And I mean, more and more every day, there's a concern. There's certainly a concern for a guy like me that's got 2 young kids under 5, like of what they're going to inherit with how just staunch and overt they are in this communist agenda, that it's very clear that all they want is total control of people's minds, of their spirits, of everything.
Yeah, that's what it looks like. It's all been about control. And, we may be on separate sides of the country, 3 hours apart with the time zone. But we've basically been, I would say, under very parallel governments in that, what Cuomo did, Newsom did, and vice versa. And now you're seeing the radical left hijack the leaders that are I don't even call Kathy Hochul a leader. I wouldn't call Gavin Newsom a leader. He is leading California into the ground, but I wouldn't call him a leader, with regards to how good that attribute could be, how good that characteristic could be about somebody, leadership qualities you would know, you having served in the United States Marine Corps, where that type of thing is instilled in you and in your brothers and sisters who you served with. I wouldn't call Gavin Newsom a leader. I would call him a failure. But you're in California, I'm in New York, and we see these draconian measures, these, whether it's a vaccine mandate, whether it's a mask mandate in schools, whether it's the firing of so many men and women who are either serving as police officers or firefighters or doctors and nurses who are the heroes back in the peak of the pandemic when nobody knew what exactly this virus was all about and hospitals were quote unquote being overrun. And then all of a sudden these people became expendable if they didn't want to take a vaccine that we're now seeing, according to a study, albeit a small one, that's showing up in breast milk. Okay, there are traces of the mRNA vaccine, whether it's Moderna or Pfizer, showing up in women's breast milk, which means if you have a child and they're breastfeeding and you've just received the vaccine within a certain amount of time, they may be, getting some of that at a very young age when you don't know what that's going to do to them. And I'm unvaccinated and proud. I've had COVID one time. I know other people who have been vaccinated, whether it's multiple times or once or whatever, who have gotten COVID multiple times. The Pfizer CEO, I mean, you're a doctor, you're a chiropractor. The Pfizer CEO, has contracted COVID for the second time in 6 weeks. I got it once. I got over it. I've been exposed to it a number of times after the fact. My own sister had it. I told her, cough on me. Give me the cup you're drinking out of. I want to put my antibodies to the test. So you are a doctor, though.
I'm salivating at this one. I love this. This is
just
dude. There's blood coming down my lips right now.
So give it to me then. Give it to me and go.
I got it for you, baby.
Go.
Here it is. It's just simple, man. It's like our immune system is so powerful. God gave us interleukins, interferons, tumor necrosis factor. They come from our brain. They travel down our spinal cord. They go out to every cell, tissue, and organ. If we're on a functioning nervous system and our nervous system is working, what we have to do when we talk about COVID and the insanity of the is we have to think about like the fundamentals of healing. And it always, you don't catch germs. What happens is you have a compromised immune system and then germs invade your body because you have a weakened system. I mean, think about all the people parties. They had smallpox parties. You get a bunch of kids, you get them in somebody's house, everybody gets it. What do? They have herd immunity. They have immunity towards that virus now. Well, what happened in 1981? Paul Reagan, who I think is one of the greatest presidents of all time, unknowingly, Big Pharma, whoever, pork barreling, one of these sleazy scumbag politicians, put a bill in front of him that I don't think he knew in his right mind that he was signing, that basically removed liability from the pharmaceutical companies for one drug.
And that one drug is vaccines, which it became criminal for you or illegal for you to sue a vaccine company or vaccine. It's the only drug you can't sue them on, okay, that you can't criminally charge them for, that you can't do a lawsuit for. And so when we look at when I was a kid, there were 24 doses of vaccines. Now there's 72. And I'm not trying to convince mercury, aluminum, dead baby fetal tissue. This has been going on for years. And guys like Robert F. K. Jr., people like Del Bigtree, people like my good friend, I can't remember his name, Andy Wakefield. Sorry, Dr. Wakefield. Tons of people have been talking about it forever, and they were vilified. But now you get this crazy thing, this Wuhan, China.
It's all about it. It came from China. You know all about it. And nobody wants to say that, but it came from China. We all know where it came from, okay? We all know exactly where Wuhan. We call it the Wuhan lab. And it was a horrible thing what they did to the world. They unleashed it on the world, a terrible thing. But it came from China. You're correct.
I don't even know. Sometimes I just have to pause, dude, because I have to catch my breath. Beautiful.
Bigly, or I call it huge.
Bigly.
Okay, bigly.
That's just beautiful and big. So we look at all this stuff. We look at how first time ever wear a facial condom, swallow your own CO2. That's toxic to your nervous system. It's toxic to your immune system. And now we know that they're shedding.
Yes.
We know that couples where one person gets vaccinated, one person does, if they identify as a man and woman, right? In this day and age, you never know. They could identify as a raccoon, a staple, paperclip, who knows? But if they're identifying as a man and a woman, the woman sitting by the vaccinated man will start to have menstrual problems. Sherry Tenpenny's been talking about this, Judy Mikovich. And if you're finding that that's the case for you, I'm not judging you. I'm saying go get help. Go to Sherry's website. Go to Judy Mikovich's website. We know that most people that are on our side of the political aisle, they're not doing that because they're just kind of seeing, hey, this is weird. There was, our president didn't get elected and there was this fraud and there was these mail-in ballots and then wear a mask, don't wear a mask, lie about it. CDC says, that now you don't have to wear one, but they said you had to wear one. And then it was the horse dewormer, but then they're giving it to illegal immigrants, but it's outlawed for pharmacies to give to us in the U.S.
Congress was taking it too.
Yeah. Cray.
Yeah. Congress was taking it too.
You can't make it up, dude.
No, you can't. And that the problem is they made up these rules and then didn't follow them. And, I hate to quote him because I don't think he did a very good job at all. And I know that he destroyed the elderly population here in New York. Up as many as 15,000, maybe more seniors were killed because of this man's reckless decisions. But just before he resigned, just before he left office, Andrew Cuomo said nobody's going to follow the rules if they don't make sense. And he said that because of, and I'm not quoting him as some sort of genius. I'm just saying even on his way out, he started to realize, that people were done. And Cuomo, he said it on his way out. He was talking about summer camps and how kids were not going to be forced to wear masks when they were rolling around and playing volleyball. He said, if you're playing volleyball, you don't have to wear a mask. That's what Cuomo said. But he said, if you don't follow, if the rules don't make sense, people aren't going to want to follow the rules. He knows that because he came up with some of the stupidest rules during COVID. You can't stand up here because that's the COVID zone. But when you're sitting, you're good. I mean, I remember being at a bar, sitting in a bar stool, which when I stood up from the bar stool, I was the same height as when I was sitting in the bar stool, but because my rump was out of the seat, I had to put the mask on, even though my head was at the same, height, altitude, if you will, as when I was in the bar stool. I remember that when, you could go to a bar and order alcohol until we found out that the virus was smart enough to know that you're drinking beer and it wasn't root beer. So now if you're drinking alcohol, you have to have food. I remember that 6 feet apart was supposed to be, the magic number that would stop the spread of COVID. If you were 5 feet apart, you were going to kill grandma. I remember when they said that masks were supposed to be the number one thing. If we all just wear masks, we're going to stop the spread. Meanwhile, I went to Costco earlier today, and there was a dirty used mask in the shopping cart, and here I am thinking someone wore that thing to virtue signal and then left it behind for me to deal with, which is disgusting. You're not stopping the spread at all. Nobody's going to follow the rules if they don't make sense, and I think with regards to ivermectin, with regards to hydroxychloroquine, with regards to the JAB, the mandates that followed it, and all of those things, the rules don't make sense, and people are just done. And I think that's why you saw that, where you're seeing Democrats back away from that now, because there's an election coming. But if you don't think that they're going to try and force it right after those midterms, if they have a good result, I think you haven't been paying attention. And on that note, I want you to tell everybody where they can find you, and what your goals are to push, and how we're going to push in your state before the midterms.
Well, we're doing a lot of stuff with a organization, because really, honestly, in this state, it's the rhinos, which I would say that's probably the case in every state. We're really encouraging people, try to reform your state GOP, because so many people, when we talk voter fraud, this is a point I meant to throw in there earlier, Shawn, is it's like when we talk voter fraud, some people want to think or say, and I know you're not doing this, but some folks do, that somehow it's just a blue lead agenda, like it's just the Democrats that want voter fraud. There are some establishment Republicans that want voter fraud is red and blue.
Yep.
The swamp is red and blue. Outside of that, you have the MAGA constitutionalists like Shawn and myself and others, and like Jeremy Harrell, and there are so many of them, but we have to really look beyond the institutional fight, and we also have to see our enemies as a lot of the rhinos out there. They don't want election integrity. The Mitch McConnells, the Kevin McCarthy's, people of that nature, they can't continue to get elected. And so what we're doing out here is really trying to reform the state GOP. Got a coalition, bringing together a bunch of grassroots groups, raising money, doing stuff to support candidates, doing Democrats and Republicans, which is any election in California now. Gee, I wonder why. Maybe they're trying to rig it. Just saying. We don't have a Republican or a Democratic primary. Everybody's in the field together. So you get these ballots of 26 and 23 people. You get, in some cases, the GOP putting up candidates that they know are establishment puppets, so that you don't get a grassroots person in there. And then the Democrats are throwing out, and it's only the top two voter getters. So we just really see a problem with that. If we're going to take back this state, it's going to happen because we've reformed the state GOP. So heavily working on that, trying to equal level, city council, sheriff, things of that nature. Nothing different in that sense than what you guys are doing. And then, you can go to Dr. Cordie Williams, DrCordiew. I believe on True Social, it's DrCordiew. Getter, it's the same thing.
Yep.
And then on some of them out there, it's DrCordie, and then a simple last name Williams on Instagram. We're probably on 10 different platforms. We try to be everywhere like you, and there's so many of them now. You can, you have to pick and choose a little bit, but man, what a great first show, brother.
I think it was good, and we will again. I apologize to anybody who with audio problems. We will troubleshoot those, working out the kinks. But I think we got something cool here, and a coast-to-coast alliance here. Again, an honor to be doing a show with the legend, Dr. Cordie Williams, who I finally was able to meet.
You, dude.
I mean, my goodness gracious, that was a long period of flirting online between you and I, sir. But it was nice to spend a little time in Ohio and it's going to be nice again coming up shortly. I believe next month, just a couple weeks until you're out here on the East Coast, right? And we'll have a good time. So, Dr. Cordie Williams, you can find him on social media at Dr. Cordie W. Follow him on Getter. Follow him on Truth Social. You know where to find me, guys. It's not hard. Just get out there and spread the good word. We're going to be back here next Wednesday, same time, same place. We'll troubleshoot all the issues that we can. Maybe work out a few kinks and figure out a way to get some of these little issues that were persisting throughout the show. We'll get them out of here. But it was, I believe, it was a fun first show. I'm really happy, and I'm really excited to see where this thing goes.
All right. Well, thanks for having us, guys. Thanks for tuning in. Shawn, thank you for having me, and we'll see you guys next week.
Yeah, we will see you guys next week. Thank you so much, and we will catch you same time, same place right here on the Unalienable Right. Thank you, guys.